Exclamation, everybody. Welcome back to Sunday Ramblings in Cube World. I am at this castle that I passed last time here with all these high level creatures in it, and I decided I'm going to throw my body at it until I get frustrated and give up here. Just to see if I can perhaps conquer it somewhat. I also, off camera, went back to the city, the little town, and then sold off all my stuff that I had gotten because I noticed that I'm already getting off to a good start here. I noticed that my inventory was rather full, so I went back and did that and came back here. So we're ready to go here. It's a, for me it is Saturday afternoon, December the 14th. Very snowy Saturday afternoon here. So perfect time for me to sit down and play a little bit of Cube World. Also the reason for me doing it a little bit earlier in the day rather than later, as I usually do. So I decided, I've been mulling this over in my head for most of the week. In case you were living under a rock, something happened earlier in the week with YouTube in general. It's been reported in lots of different places. And I've been, ever since it happened, I had an inkling that this was going to happen. Probably, if you look back at one of my earlier episodes of Cube World here, I made reference, a very quick reference to it. That I heard rumors that things were going to happen. But instead things actually happened this week. And I've been kind of sort of backing off from it a little bit here, trying to give a little bit of background here. I've been deciding whether or not I want to talk about it. And if so, I figured if I do go into depth about it, that it would probably take up the entire episode. So I decided, that's sort of what was giving me pause. But I decided that it's worth it. I mean, there's thousands of videos out there now already talking about the new YouTube changes. But I figured I'll throw my hat in there too, since it is something that affects gaming, at least gaming on YouTube as in general, and potentially affects what I'm doing, but we'll get to that later. So what I've been dancing around here for the past, I don't know, 3 minutes or so, is YouTube on Monday began their first wave of changes related to the way partner networks work, or as they call them, multi-channel networks, or MCNs. These are your networks that you may not know that your favorite YouTubers are affiliated with. You may or may not. It depends on whether they've made it clear of such affiliation. But some of the major ones are Machinima, which arguably is a major one because it's largely backed by YouTube itself, for several of its, or for a lot of its content. They tend to have deeper pockets. They also are the most popular because they have the most channels. One of the first ones as well to actually get this partnership with YouTube. There's other ones like Polaris, and Curse, and whatever the former IGN network has turned into. IGN is owned by someone else now. I don't even know if it even fully exists anymore as an entity. But I know that there were a few YouTubers that I watched that were partnered with them. So I don't know what the name of their partner is now. But anyway, that's one of those. There's several. And I don't have an exhaustive list of all of them, because there are so many of them. What these, you ask probably, what is the purpose of these networks, right? Well, in order to explain that, I sort of have to give a little bit of a history lesson. And hopefully I get some of my facts correct here. I'm only vaguely aware of some of these things. I've done a little bit of looking up, a little bit of research, but not an exhaustive amount by any stretch of the imagination. So we'll start off, first of all, with YouTube in its infancy. Back in the day, even before YouTube was owned by Google, they were a target of much litigation. Mostly, the more prominent of those court battles was Viacom versus YouTube. Okay, Viacom is a big media conglomerate, old media conglomerate, and their beef with YouTube at the time was that regular old users were just uploading copywritten content, just uploading entire TV shows, movies, what have you, up to YouTube, and they were arguably and understandably upset by that because they weren't making any money off of it. So they took YouTube to court, and I believe during that time is when Google actually acquired them, or perhaps it was just after Google acquired them that all this stuff started to hit the court system. And I don't honestly recall what the ultimate ruling was on that. Whatever it was not very good for YouTube in general. As sort of as a mitigation measure, a way for YouTube to continue operating and still have the blessings, or at least a partial blessing, of the of content owners. Sorry. Google engineers came up with this whole content ID system. And what that is it's essentially a content management system where these big, media people, Viacom and others, can upload their videos or upload samples of their content to YouTube, and they go into this content management system, and then that system runs whenever Joe Schlub or myself goes and uploads a video to YouTube. What happens is, I'll upload a video, any YouTuber will upload a video, it will go into what's called a processing phase, where YouTube will reformat it, re-encode it, I should say, from whatever format you had it in the first place, and do several other things with it. And one of those several other things is the content ID matching, where they will run their library of registered content against your video and see if any parts of it match. And the parts that match can be as little as a second, is from my experience. And of course, if it's matching, then there's several things that can happen due to that. One of those is that the content owner who registered in the CMS can block the content completely. They can just say, nope, this has got to go, in which case it will go. Or they can simply flag it and monitor it. So in other words, everything looks business as usual, but they're keeping a close eye on, the statistics for it and whether it goes viral and all that other stuff. And the third option, which is the option that by and large is the one that they employ the most often, is they will hijack the monetization of your video. Now I'm sort of jumping ahead of myself here because really I should explain some of these other things around that, but trying to keep this straight as I can, but it's going to be a little bit jumpy here. So before I go any further into the content ID stuff, let's talk about some of the stuff around it. DMCA. This is the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. This was enacted in the late 90s. It was a way to legally provide a legal means for content owners to go onto the internet and get some kind of restitution for their restitution is not the right word to use, but some kind of relief, I guess, for their for people who are infringing upon their copyrights. Basically, it's a method to do things. In this case, it was a method that they could, a formal request that could be made by the copyright owner to whatever site is hosting their content or content that they believe is infringing their copyrights, and have that content removed. That's why DMCA is kind of a big hammer that people tend to wield, because it can be used in more nefarious purposes besides just the initial intent of it. Because a lot of website owners and operators just don't want to deal with the legal repercussions of not responding to those requests in a timely manner. The Google Content ID system has nothing at all to do with the DMCA. And there's a lot of sites out there. You can see the confusion on a lot of the commenters who are commenting on these articles out here about these recent changes. There's a confusion there, and it's understandable that this has that these are valid DMCA claims are being made, and people are just angry that it's a larger crackdown is coming down the pike. The reality of the situation is that the Content ID system is outside the scope of the DMCA. It is an additional step that YouTube has done, Google has done, to further mitigate and further placate the content owners, and basically to stop the bleeding. I mean, YouTube was getting hit with tons and tons of lawsuits. The floodgates were opening. They were looking for any way to continue operating without this constant legal threat. And this was their solution. They came up with a software engineering solution to what is essentially a social engineering problem. And that always leads to interesting and problematic quote unquote solutions. So the Content ID stuff is, in many ways, it is a bastardization of the DMCA. It really does not hold. It really does not, is really not in the right spirit of what the DMCA was trying to accomplish, right? If you can say that it was ever trying to accomplish something well in the first place. That's to say that the DMCA process was very clear cut. It was, there's no assumption of guilt necessarily, because there was a counterclaim process, right? So somebody files a DMCA claim, website owners have to respond. Now, usually they have to respond in a very draconian way, which is, block the content from being accessible. But then they also usually, and it's up to the website owner, but usually they will contact the content creator and say, look, we got a claim, we took your video down. Here's who you have to respond to if you want to file a counterclaim. And then you have an opportunity as the content creator to or as the quote unquote potential infringer to respond to that and say, and legally with a counterclaim and say, look, no, seriously, here's my proof that I had permission to do this, to upload this content. This is content that I've created. This is protected potentially by fair use, although I will talk about that a little bit later, because that what people think is protected by fair use probably isn't, and I'll say why. You know, even though I'm not much of a lawyer, I will give you my theories as to why I think that's the case. And then when that counterclaim is filed, the website owner can then re-enable that content, re-enable the video, re-enable, you know, the upload of that content. And then and then from that point on, it's up to the courts to deal with it, right? Like if the copyright holder is insistent that they own this is infringing, then they can go file lawsuits and claims and everything else. The DMCA was there sort of to protect the website operators from being culpable in in this kind of litigation, because they were being held liable as the Viacom rulings came out, for YouTube. So it was a very good thing in some ways, for the internet. There's other parts of it that, particularly around software, software licenses and programming and stuff, where it gets really dicey and far-reaching and inadequate. But at least for video production and that kind of thing, it's pretty fair, all things considered. And general website, like, hey, I posted an article or something like that, written text and all that thing. And as I mentioned, the Content ID system has nothing at all to do with that. The YouTube's Content ID system is just something that YouTube engineers came up with, and they did it really to stop the bleeding and stop the litigations from coming on, and give, basically to shut up the content owners and just say, look, here, if you're really that passionate about it, upload your shit to us, and we'll run it through our algorithms, and we'll do your work for you. Essentially, we'll no longer burden you with the burden of or encumber you with the burden of enforcing your own copyrights, even though you really are. It really is your burden. So what happens when Content ID kicks in on a video and matches a portion of a video? Well, there's two things that can happen, right? It's either, as I mentioned before, there's three paths that the content owner can take. Most of the time, they'll take the path of hijacking the monetization of the video. But then, as the content creator goes, from the content creator's perspective, the person who uploaded the video that it was apparently infringing, there's really there's two things you can do. We'll settle on two things here. One is you can dispute it, in which case your video is kind of sort of restored. I mean, your video was never really taken down, depending on what action was taken. May not have actually been taken down, but your video is kind of put into a little bit of a limbo. It's still there, it's still visible, everything's going on with it, but there is no monetization if you had that enabled. It's completely suspended until the dispute is resolved. And a lot of times these people who put the initial claim in the CMS, they usually are given, I believe, a month, perhaps two, to respond. And then if they don't respond, then it's an automatic win for the person for the video creator who disputed it. A lot of times they will wait, the content owners will wait until the very last minute to then redispute. to reinstantiate, I should say, the Content ID claim on your video, and basically at that point you're kind of screwed. You can dispute it again as the video creator. You can dispute it again, but at that point you start to get into a little bit of a problematic pattern where if you lose that second dispute, you will get a copyright strike against your account. Now, what the heck is a copyright strike? Well, Google has a 3 strikes policy, right? So Content ID in and of itself does not generate strikes, okay? You can get Content ID matches off the wazoo, and you can basically, by and large, ignore them if you don't really care. Or you can do steps to mitigate them. Like what I often do is I upload my videos as private first. That way they go through the whole Content ID, algorithm. And then I get to see, hey, here's the portion of your video that was actually, that we believe is infringing, and here's what we believe it's infringing upon. And you get to hear a sample of both. You get it. The video will start where it was hit, where it was mashed, and then you get to hear a sample of, usually, you get to hear a sample of what it actually matched. And then what I usually do in that case, and I've had this happen on a couple of my Starpoint Gemini episodes, what I generally do at that point is, since it's already private, nobody can see it because you have to give out the URL in order for people to see a private video. I just delete it outright, go back, do some kind of mitigation. Usually it's I'll mute the audio. I'll go back into into Vegas and edit the video. At that point, mute the game audio, and then do some post commentary over top of it to kind of fill in the gap. Usually it's not, the matches that I've hit were only for about 2 seconds of content. So a lot of times I can just get away with muting the audio of the game, and there's no, it just sounds like to the casual observer who's watching the video, it just sounds like maybe I had an audio problem. When in fact it was just me mitigating the Content ID stuff. And then more often than not, when I go and re-upload again, everything's fine. So all that said, what are the strikes that I was talking about a little bit earlier? The strikes are, as I mentioned, if you dispute something and lose, and then dispute it again and lose again, you get a strike. Now, if you get 3 strikes, that's it. Your channel is completely shut down. Sayonara. Nice to meet you. Have fun in your future endeavors. All right, that's it. It's done. It's over with. However, each strike along the way does come with a penalty, right? So the first strike, there's several features that YouTube has. For instance, thumbnails, being able to upload videos that are greater than 15 minutes in length, certain other things that partners can get access to, like analytics and trying to think of, there's other things that partners have that I don't have that I can't really speak to, but those can all get restricted. It can restrict your private, being able to upload private videos, being able to upload unlisted videos, which are public videos that are simply not listed anywhere, are not searchable or not listed. All these are features of YouTube, and as you get copyright strikes, those features start to get eroded away. So, like the first strike, and I don't have the full details, and hopefully I never find out the full details because I don't want any to begin with. But each strike that you get limits those things even more. So, like the first strike, I believe, gives you limits you back down to 15-minute videos. You can't have thumbnails. A few other no unlisted videos and a few other restrictions. I think the second strike, if I'm correct in this, excuse me, causes you to not to have your upload privileges revoked for a period of time. I don't know what it is. I think it's like 2 weeks, maybe. I don't know. I don't know for sure, but I know that's one of the things that will happen is that they will restrict your upload privileges, so you won't be able to upload anything new for a little while. And then the third strike, obviously, that's it. You're gone. You're out. These strikes, though, do resolve themselves over time. So even channels that have had 1 or 2 strikes, after about a year or so, those strikes get expunged and you get back into good standing again. So it's not the absolute end of the world for people, for content creators. But it does hurt a lot, particularly for those who are monetizing their videos. So where does this whole, where does this whole, all this anger and resentment start to come from as far as these new changes that have happened? Well, first of all, what are the new changes? These multi-channel networks, up to this point, well, okay, let me step back for a minute. What is the appeal of the multi-channel networks? All right. So now that I've given you sort of the background, some more background about YouTube is that back in the day when they first enabled this ability to become a partner, a YouTube partner, where you can run ads alongside of your videos, run ads in the beginning and at the end, and even interstitial ads, which came later, on your videos. They gave you the ability, if you were a YouTube partner, to collect a portion of the revenue. In other words, YouTube, for every ad that they run, they get all the CPIs, or the cost per impression. They get all that money that advertisers pay for having that video or having that advertisement run on the system, on their website. And that's what keeps them in business as well. The partner program was a way to sort of give the content creators a means to get a piece of that pie. I don't know what the percentage is, and often you won't hear anybody really talk about the percentage, because I think that by contract they're not allowed to, because that would give other competing services the ability to actually compete on price, which is what they can't do right now, which is why I don't see a whole lot of like Let's Play contenders going over to other competing sites. There's other reasons too, but that's one of the major ones, is that they get more money here on YouTube than they generally would anywhere else. So that early on, becoming a partner of YouTube was very, very difficult if you were a gaming channel. There were other channels that had it a little bit easier, like vlogs and all that stuff. But the Let's Players had a very difficult time getting partnered with YouTube directly in the early days. And mostly it's because of the whole gray area that is fair use that kind of revolves around these videos, these Let's Play videos. It makes a company like YouTube very skittish, right? Because they've already been slapped tons and tons of times on copywritten content, and then to have a whole cadre of Let's Players come onto your system and recording video game footage and putting commentary over top of it, it's a very, very gray area, and YouTube is understandably skittish about that given their history, right? So these MCNs, or multi-channel networks, were devised early on, like Machinima and whatnot. They came into the picture early on as a way to make it easier for Let's Players to get partnered with YouTube. So instead of the Let's Players partnering directly with YouTube, these multi-channel networks would instead partner with YouTube. They would gain access to all the AdWords accounts that people are using. They would manage the actual revenue share as well. So YouTube would share their revenue with them as though they were the ones creating the video. And then it's up to them to then take that portion of the revenue and divide it up amongst the actual content creator. Also, along that same line, in order for it to also be an attractive alternative for YouTube, an attractive model for YouTube to actually bless the whole thing, they offer to, I guess, outsource the checks for copyrights. The content ID is still there, but I mean, it's always there as an algorithm. But the actual human, I'm going to check a bunch of videos today and make sure that they're not infringing copyrights, was sort of the reason that YouTube, I guess, really blessed them in the first place, right? Because they were, that's less staff that YouTube has to have looking at every video that's going up. They can just, the idea was, many hands make light work, right? And it's a good idea. I mean, if the multi-channel networks were doing what they were supposed to do, were doing their job, what they were originally, their original charter was for, then, there would be no reason for YouTube to come in later and slap them on the hands and say, hey, we're going to force you to unmanage most of your channels because we don't think you're doing a very good job of catching copyrighted content. That's neither here nor there. That's just, we'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. So for a YouTube video producer, it was a very attractive offer, right? Because now, for an MCN, you get, first of all, you can become partnered. Back then that was really the easiest way for you to become partnered, and you're making some money, and potentially, if you have enough viewers, making enough money to make it a full-time job to live off of. And there are quite a few YouTubers who do this as a full-time job and live off the revenues of the ads, which is why when you run ad blocker and stuff, you're actually hurting little people, not Google. Google has enough ads across enough platforms to make up for any potential loss that you would incur on one video on their site. However, the video producers don't have that luxury. This is their only outlet. So over time, though, what happened was YouTube relaxed its policies around the partnering, how to actually become a partner on YouTube. It became very easy. In fact, nowadays it's just a button. Like literally, I go onto my channel setup page, and it's just sitting right there like, hey, would you like to become a YouTube partner and get monetized and all that stuff? Very, very freaking easy now. Whereas before it was more of an arduous process. So you might ask, well, if it's so easy now, why does anybody join an MCN anymore? Why are they still around? Why are they still popular? Well, with ease comes other problems, and that problem is the content ID system. It's automated. It's very rarely viewed by content ID. I should correct myself there. It's not necessarily the content ID system that's the problem. It's the fact that you have to go through a approval for monetization. Okay. And you say, well, shouldn't the multi-channel networks have some kind of approval process as well? I mean, wasn't that the whole point? Was that they were going to share some of that load? The answer is no, not at least not automatically anyway. Now they might do some kind of random internal check that I'm not aware of because I'm not partnered with anybody. But for by and large, it's not an automated thing that absolutely positively has to happen before your video goes up. In fact, one of the attractive things that draws people to these MCNs is that as soon as their video goes live, it's monetized. It's an instant thing. Whereas when you're partnered with YouTube on your own, it can take several hours to several days before your video actually is actually approved for monetization and actually starts making money for you. And during that whole period of time, your video is public, people are watching it, they're getting that initial surge. If you've got a lot of subscribers, there's that initial surge coming along. You're getting thousands of views and you're getting no money for any of those views. There are ways that people try to get around it. There are ways to sort of get around it. One of the ones that I've heard is that a lot of YouTubers will upload their video as unlisted. So it's public and it's unlisted, and then they'll let it go through the monetization process, which could take hours, days, weeks, months, whatever. And then once it's actually been approved for monetization, then they'll actually make it unlisted and allow, public to view it, allow their subscribers to view it. That seems to work in some cases. It doesn't work in all cases, particularly when it's something that you've got a scoop on, right? Much like in the news business, he who reports first gets the story. He who scoops gets the story. In several cases in video game in the Let's Play world, you're competing with thousands of other people who are also trying to record and get eyeballs on their videos. And the faster you get the scoop on something, on a particular new game, or maybe there's a game in development that you manage to contact the developers on, that kind of thing. The sooner you get that video out, the more likely is that all the eyeballs are going to be on your video, and hence you're going to get a good payday out of that. The waiting for monetization, though, puts a snag in all that because it's not reliable, right? Again, it could take days, it could take hours, it could take weeks. You really can't tell offhand. Excuse me, had to sneeze for a minute. So, for those who are making this as their full-time job, joining a multi-channel network where you get that instant monetization, you get those initial videos out, you get those initial eyeballs, everything's counting towards that, towards your wallet. That makes them, extremely attractive. You want to partner up as soon as you possibly can because you don't have to deal with the idiocy that is, YouTube in general. What has happened recently, now that I've sort of given you as much background as I can think to give without without belaboring it too much, what has happened recently is that YouTube has gone to the multi-channel networks and has said, guess what, guys? You need to, we're instantiating 2 new levels of partner. Managed partners and affiliate partners. And the managed partners are going to be the same thing that you've always done and always known and up to this point. You get the instant monetization and all that stuff. With one exception, and that is if your managed partners get a copyright strike, and it is ridiculously easy to get one, as Total Biscuit has demonstrated in the past with the whole Day One Gary's incident. where basically it did a review of a video, did a review of a game. It was a negative review because rightfully so. It was a deservedly negative review of the game. The developer didn't depreciate it too much, and they threw a copyright claim in for it just because they didn't like the review that they got. And this happens a lot. This is why like Metacritic and all that stuff is such a game anymore. It's you know, you can't rely on anything you see on there because it's all bought and paid for votes anymore. And this was very much in that light where they put a strike against it. What would happen in the new world come January when this change fully happens is that strike would also count, instead of just counting against TV, that strike would count against the entire network, the entire MCN. Now, I don't know how many strikes, and nobody's really said anything as to how many strikes a network has to get before they're removed from being a YouTube network, or for that matter, what even the initial strikes would do to the network. Like what kind of restrictions would it put on the network? Who the hell knows? I don't think anybody knows that yet. I don't know that Google has ever even made that clear yet. But it caused the networks to sort of freak out a little bit, right? Because now it's like a lot of them have grown so large. They've grown larger than they can really support. Dare I say they've grown larger than they can support. They have, some of them have several hundred channels, if not near 1,000, and that's just too much usually for those MCNs to actually police, right? So YouTube said, well, you know, that's for your managed partners. We're also putting this other level in called affiliates, and basically an affiliate is someone who is partnered but gains no benefits to being partnered. In other words, they might as well be partnered directly through YouTube and not through you guys. Now, I say that humorously, knowing full well that that's not actually the case. There are some perks that you get from being in a network, in an MCN. For instance, some MCNs will give you access to a free library of audio recordings, royalty-free audio recordings, music and stuff like that that you can add to your videos to spice them up a little bit, and other little perks like that. And presumably affiliates will still have those perks because they'll still be paying for them, because they'll still be getting that same cut. The MCN will still be taking the same cut regardless. So I imagine they'll still give them the same perks in that regard. But as far as the instant monetization, no more, right? So if someone was a managed partner and they just got bumped down to affiliate, now they're dealing with the same things they would have dealt with had they just been independent and partnered directly with YouTube. Namely, they got to go through the whole Content ID system. They don't get a free pass from that, and you know, they have to deal with the constant copyright strikes and claims and all that stuff. They have no one on their side to help them with that kind of thing, or to help them with the communication with YouTube. Basically, they're screwed from their perspective. They're back to the very thing that they tried to get away from in the first place. So what does that? So that kind of explains why there's been a lot of anger and resentment around these changes from your favorite YouTubers. But I mean, they've also said, and I would be remiss if I didn't point this out, that YouTube has said that they will be having a sort of a different Content ID claim system in place for affiliates, where, or I should say, a different monetization review in place, So whereas it would have to be, you know, it was unreliable as to when your review would be over and you would be able to monetize something. In this case, it's more of a, you get, it's based on your behavior. So if you've had a lot of good behavior, even though a lot of your videos at first will get blocked for monetization at first, over time it'll adjust based upon how many of those how many videos you end up getting through scot-free. So how many videos were found not to be problematic for monetization, and it would sort of back up and give you, you know, check your channel less often, check your videos less often if you've been good. 'Tis the season, right? So that is slightly different than the normal YouTube partners, from what I understand, because normal YouTube partners, they basically have to suck it up regardless. Whereas I think the affiliates now, they might get back to where they were, sort of, over time. So, what that means then for the YouTube video creators and all that stuff is that those who have gotten bumped down to affiliate are going to be hurting, at least initially, when it comes to getting their videos monetized again, until that kind of smooths itself over. It also means that because they suddenly flipped that switch, right, that a lot of videos that they had already in their back catalog for, you know, months and years ago are suddenly getting Content ID claims, because now they're suddenly going through the Content ID algorithm, whereas they got a free pass before. That's where a lot of the freakouts are happening from, is that they're, you know, a lot of these people with like 500 videos are going back and seeing that they have 60 videos behind them that are, you know, in their catalog that they now have to go through and do something about, because they've lost, in most cases, monetization rights on all of them. It's now been redirected to somebody else, to some other third party. Now, the heartening thing about this whole thing that is really makes me feel good is that in the wake of this, a lot of companies, mostly indie, but a lot of AAA companies, came out and said, whoa, wait a second, we don't like this any more than you do. Like, we're going to actually go and help you out if you get some of these claims. And a couple of them have actually put their foot down and actually helped out some Let's Players. So for instance, Ubisoft, there was people who were playing a lot of Ubisoft games were getting a lot of claims from their in-house, or well, not in-house, but their partner called Idol, IDOL, which did a lot of the licensing for the music in their games. They've actually publicly said that they're telling Idol to sort of back off a little bit and say, look, we like Let's Players. These claims that are coming through, we don't really agree with. We're going to fix it. And they've gone through and actually wiped out a lot of these claims that have come through on videos. Another company, Deep Silver, they discovered that there was this gaming channel called 4Gamer Movie that was putting out a whole bunch of bogus claims on their behalf, on behalf of the Deep Silver, and they've put an end to that. They've stopped that as well. Very heartening to see this. What's also very heartening is to see a lot of companies, especially the AAAs, taking time to go on their websites and actually explicitly say, here are the permissions we give you for doing Let's Plays of our videos. Here's our stipulations. Here's how we feel on it. With the notable exception of Nintendo, who is just being a dick about everything. We love Let's Play videos as long as we get the money for them. I had to I had to fire a shot across their bow there. I'm sorry. So again, very happy to see a lot of that happening. That's terrific. I myself thought that I wasn't sure up to this point um, how well Let's Plays were being received. I know that indie guys, the indie gamers or indie developers, I should say, love them to death because it is free marketing. Um, Even if the person creating the video is making money off of that video, it is still, they couldn't pay for better marketing, honestly. And it allows the indie devs to focus on their game and some of their community management and not worry so much about getting the word out on things. Which is why I've always stuck with the indies, because the AAAs frighten me. There's whole divisions of lawyers out there who have nothing better to do than to litigate against YouTubers, because that's what they're getting paid for. And so these big companies, whether the big company devs like the Let's Plays or not, somebody's farmed out all the legal work to someone who has nothing better to do. So hence, their public image is not always the same as their public face is not always the same as the one that they would like it to be. And so, to see all this outpouring of, yes, this is what we like, these are the permissions we give. This is great. I mean, this is great news. I might even start looking at some AAA games to do videos of because of it. Because it's, again, very heartening. As far as some other things here, I said earlier that I would kind of put fair use to the side for a minute and talk about it again. I'm going to try to do this some justice to this fair use thing. But I am not a lawyer, and I don't even play one on TV, so take what you will from this. This is just my interpretation of it. If I look at my channel, and I look at the videos on my channel, do any of the videos that I do fall under what I would consider to be fair use? Possibly this series, the Cube World stuff, because I talk about other things, and the video here is really just a means for me to give you something to look at while I talk about other things. Otherwise, it would just be a blank screen with a PowerPoint slide. This at least has some kind of action going on. So, would this, in my mind, qualify as fair use? Probably. I think it's transformative enough that it would probably be okay. But what about some of my other videos? What about my long form LPs? What about Starpoint Gemini? Starpoint Gemini, probably not. I would probably lose any fair use grounds on that game because it's a long form LP. I try along the way to critique the gameplay mechanics and critique the story and critique, other things about the game, provide other information about the game, about the upcoming games and all that stuff, as a means to try and make some kind of fair use claim around it. Because I am transforming it slightly, but it would not, the transformation is not sufficient that I would ever win any kind of argument, legal or otherwise, that it was fair use. So yeah, they're probably not. There was a good article that I will link to that actually explains this a little bit better. But essentially, the argument being made in that article was, technically speaking, my spoken words and my editing technique, not necessarily the edits, but the technique of, maybe maybe I do a fade or something like that, when I do certain things, that that content, like my spoken word and stuff, technically I would hold the copyright for that because that's me. I am the creator of that. But the underlying content, the actual video game itself, is not something that I own anything to, any rights to at all. Even a sandbox game like this, where everybody's experience is a little bit different, probably would not be transformative enough to do it. Now, if I was doing a straight review, or maybe just like a short tutorial video or something like that, that might be more fair use claim. There might be more of a claim to fair use there than simply just playing the game and talking over it and having commentary. Which the article that I'll link to actually brings up a good point, which is the way Content ID works in YouTube. Because the person who uploaded the matching content into their CMS, the person who apparently owns, you know, the copyright holder apparently of that footage, right? Because they can go and claim your video claim the monetization on their video, technically speaking, they are actually violating your copyright because they're staking a claim to your audio, to your voice. So it's kind of a weird, shaky situation where the Content ID stuff is not really in the best spirit of anything, honestly. It's just not it's not even in the best spirit of the DMCA in that regard, because it's really, it's innocent, it's guilty till proved innocent, and it's actually giving content owners the ability to claim the rights to monetize portions of a video that actually you technically own, namely your voice and whatnot. So it's a very good article. You might want to read through it. It's not very long, and it kind of highlights those arguments a little bit more. I guess the question is, where does this leave me? Where do I stand on all this stuff? Well, first of all, and I hope I've done some kind of justice to the whole fair use thing, because I know a lot of people claim fair use. It's like, oh, this is all fair use, this is all fair use. In reality, the situation is a lot of times, the reality of the situation is just playing a game and screaming at the top of your lungs and making baby noises and saying the word rape every fifth word is not usually transformative enough to claim fair use. Other YouTubers like, say, Total Biscuit and others who do actual full-on reviews have a better claim to that, because they are doing it for the purpose of review, that you know, that's specific stuff, right? They're not showing you the entire game, they're showing you a portion of it, and they're showing you only enough to get their point across about certain things, right? So on and so forth. So I have no illusions in my mind, and neither should anyone else, as to what a long-form LP entails as far as fair use goes. Now, some other things, like I said, like this series it's a little bit more of a gray area, I guess, in that regard. Some of my other series, like Swordigo and Starpoint Gemini and eventually Wing Commander and all that stuff, yeah, none of that. Those long form LPs, they're not going to, they would never fly as far as fair use goes. I could never claim it on them. And I believe that to be the case with a lot of YouTubers as well. So what does this ultimately mean for me? Not a whole lot. I don't monetize any of my videos. I am not a partner with any network or with YouTube. I have no plans to either be a partner or to monetize any videos. I'm doing this merely as a fan, merely as a hobby. Um, my my goals actually for doing YouTube in the first place was to learn how to actually speak. Honestly, I'll be perfectly honest. Being a programmer, I tend to be on the sort of uh, I guess socially awkward um, spectrum of people, of personalities. And the one thing I have in particular, a problem that I have is that I don't feel like I have the skills necessary to actually hold a conversation. Like, I'm generally speaking a very quiet individual, um, and I feel like it's been hurting me all my life. Like, where I can't uh, really hold a conversation and all that stuff. And when I thought about it, I was like, you know what, I gotta, you know, I have to do something about this. And the only thing I could think to do to help me learn how to speak, learn how to hold a conversation and be an active participant in a conversation was to actually have a conversation. Now, granted, it would have been a lot cheaper if I had just stood in front of a mirror every day and talked to myself. Um, but I thought, you know, I enjoy video games a lot. Video games are the whole reason why I even got into programming in the first place, because I enjoyed them so much that I wanted to learn how to make them. I don't make them for a living, but it's the snowball that got me involved in actually learning how to program, teaching myself how to program, and then eventually making it a career. And so naturally, my thought was, well, you know, I still love video games as much as I ever did. If I have this other problem where I can't, you know, I'm not very personable, so perhaps video games will help me with that as well. And so, and hence the my YouTube channel was born. Um, that was my goal. And I thought, you know, along the way, since I am a fan of many games and I play a lot of indie games, along the way, not only can I try to help myself learn how to be a person and learn how to have a personality that isn't just you know, a potted plant. You know, it's something more than just being a potted plant. Um, I can also use it as a means to help market some of these games, particularly for the indie devs who have enough problems as it is trying to just make the game, let alone trying to get the word out about it. So that was really my whole goal for the channel, is that I'm just going to play games uh, that I enjoy, give previews of games that I've bought into. Every game that I've shown on the site, with the exception of games that are free, like Adventure Dungeon, um, are games that I've bought into. I've either contributed to the Kickstarter or otherwise have gone into their, you know, bought into their development pre-alphas or whatever. Because I want to, I've got nothing for free. I want to actually give these devs not only money to do what they love, but also help them market a little bit. And at the same time, hopefully, help myself with my whole speech thing. So these changes are coming in January. They don't really affect me. I still go through the same process I've always gone through. If I get content ID matches, I try my best to re-upload a video that doesn't infringe. If I ever got into a situation where I couldn't alter the video so it didn't infringe, I would just let it go and let it be monetized by whomever decided this week that they wanted to monetize it. You know, no big deal to me. There's no skin off my teeth. This is more something that's going to hurt people who do this as a living, and there are lots and lots of people who do it for a living. You would not have nearly the breadth of videos out there if people didn't do it for a living. So that's where I stand. Thanks for watching, everybody. I will see you next Sunday.